I'm going to present, and initially I was going to present this to a group of master's students and to doctoral students. And it's on my latest book, and my latest book is on, as Dr. Brown has mentioned, it's on gender and sexuality diversity. And this is somebody trying to get hold of me in the middle of, it's my phone. And she's going to go on, but let's leave it. Don't worry about that. It's a gentle ring. And the book. So my work is about gender and sexuality diversity. And some people might be offended by the topic, and some people might be offended by people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. But amongst you and sitting amongst us are people who are gay and lesbian, or who are bisexual, or who are transgender, sitting in the room at the moment. And so the schools that you will go to, there will be learners that will be gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. There will be teachers that will be gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. There will be people in our communities that who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender. And so the work about education and as future teachers, this is important work. It's important work because we need to understand how do we create an inclusive space and a socially just space for all learners, irrespective of their race, their gender, their sexuality, their class, or whatever difference young people come with. Our sole purpose becomes one, to teach, to affirm, to grow, and to learn from our learners as well. And so this book, my book, Troubling the Teaching and Learning of Gender and Sexuality Diversity, is available. It will be available in your library as well. And it's taken me into an amazing field and world of researching young people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. And so the presentation today, my book is part of the queer series, and the word queer, when I use the word queer, is not an offensive word. It is not a word that is used to create offense or nastiness. The word queer is a way to appropriate back and to speak back to people who are homophobic, who are heterosexist. And so queer in a way is a verb. Queer in a way is to say, I'm going to queer that, rather than queer being a noun. So I'm going to queer that means I'm going to disrupt that. I'm going to change that. So I use the word troubling and not queer. I use the word troubling because troubling is a word that suggests I'm going to disrupt, I'm going to upset, I'm going to open up what is there. And so thank you for coming to the lecture, and I hope you can engage me on some of the, if there are any questions. And by all means, please be free to ask any questions while I'm going on. I don't mind that, and that might just give the lecture a little bit more of a more spontaneous feel. Okay. So, troubling anti-oppressive education. I draw on a framework by a person called Kevin Kumashiro's work in America. And Kevin Kumashiro talks about oppression. And before we start talking about oppression, I want to share a little story about, a little bit of an anecdotal story. I teach a module or I'm teaching in the next semester, I'm going to teach a module in Stellenbosch University at the undergraduate level called How to Be Queer. And it's an interesting topic, how to be queer, because if you think about it, universities and schools teach you all your life how to be. What does it teach you how to be? You have to speak up loud. Hey? Yes. No, it teaches you to be straight. It teaches you to be straight sexually. Our curriculum is what we call a compulsory heterosexuality. Going to schools, you are told to be heterosexual. Everything about your curriculum tells you you need to be heterosexual. It also tells you something a little bit more important. It tells you all that if you are a male, and if you have male genitalia, if you have a penis, then you have to do masculine things. You have to be a man. You have to do all masculine things. In the same way, it tells you if you're a woman and you're born with a vagina, that you have to do all feminine things. So schools and society, our parents, our family, with love, teach us that we have to synchronize with the genital, what's between our legs. And so what we are all taught to be is masculine and feminine. But if somebody in the room can tell me if there's a purpose of performing masculinity and femininity any day, I'm still trying to figure out what that purpose would be. The only purpose I can understand, what the purpose of having a masculine and feminine identity, it only serves one purpose. And the purpose it serves is heterosexuality. That we are taught that if we are with male with a penis, that we'll be attracted to somebody who's all feminine, who does all feminine things. Or if we're a woman with a vagina, that we are taught that we have to love or feel attracted to somebody that's all masculine. Now, in fact, that conclusion is a very difficult one because it's hard to be feminine all the time. It is actually very difficult to be feminine all the time. Men may argue, and those who probably notice more men open their legs up, sat back a bit more, they all perform masculinity. Because no masculinity, there's no biological essence to it. People told you need to be masculine. People punished you if you were not masculine. And masculinity became regulated. But masculinity is hard for every man too. Men will say, he's talking rubbish. It's true. Men cry. Men are frightened. Men, when there's gunshots, also duck. They dive. They won't say they're scared, but they are. Because men are taught to project a particular masculinity. Now, the word there we use is a word called heteronormativity. And heteronormativity means if you are born as a male with a penis, you have to be all masculine things. And if you're a woman with a vagina, you have to do all feminine things. And all of that feeds the purpose of heterosexuality. That it creates a society that we all have to be heterosexual. But for those of you who know, the way we have sex is not all the same. Even people who are heterosexual, they may not admit it loudly, have sex differently. Not every person lets a woman opens up her legs and gets into the missionary position and penetrates. That's not only how sex happens. You know, some of you in the room like to be spanked. You know, some of you like to do other things rather than just, right? So there's a difference in how people express their sexuality. Okay? So in the same way, not all people who are born with a penis are attracted to somebody who's feminine and a woman. Some boys are attracted to other boys. Some girls are attracted to other girls. These will be learners in your school. Some boys and girls are attracted to both boys and to girls. And we use the word bisexual. So I've taught you a couple of words already. Heteronormativity, gender, okay, masculinity, femininity. And then we use the words gay, lesbian, bisexual. You're all with me at the moment, okay? Are you all following this, right? Okay. I noticed some naughty little giggles and stuff there. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that, all right? So now troubling anti-oppressive education is a really useful word because as teachers, you'll be expected to trouble in your school how oppression works in your school. Now, there are a number of oppressions. Racism is not a prejudice or discrimination, it's oppression. Sexism is an oppression. Heterosexism is an oppression. So, one of the things as teachers in a school, you will understand racism is something that doesn't happen just once off. Racism is a system. It's in the system of the school. Every aspect of the school is geared to privileging white people and disadvantaging black people. And that's how that happens in schools. And we talk about race privilege and racial disadvantage. Now, in the same way, like you have racism operating, schools recognize the systemic and structural oppression that privileges heterosexuals. So heterosexuals are privileged in schools and in society, and people who are gay, lesbian, or bisexual are disadvantaged in schools. You'll understand that dynamic, that power dynamic. So let me give you an example. A boy can often go to school and he can tell all the other boys, and they all will surround him, how he kissed a girl. And all the boys will egg him on. What else did you do? And he may make up stories, and which boys normally would do. In the same way, girls will talk to other girls and to other boys about how cute that boy is. That's what we call heterosexual privilege. You're free to do that. Nobody's going to shout at you for doing that. Nobody's going to hit you for doing that. At the same time, if a girl likes another girl, she can't really say to another girl, oh, I really like her. I think she's really sexy. Okay? Or another guy, I think she's really sexy. I wouldn't mind going out on a date with her. You would then be teased, right? You would be thought as you are deviant, something is wrong with you, you're perverted, you're perverse, you're abnormal. That's the disadvantaging of same-sex sexuality. So you can see how one story I told you, where one sexuality is encouraged, it's privileged, and the other is abnormalized, it's deviant, and there are punishments for that. Because if a girl said to another girl, oh, I really like her, I wouldn't mind going out with her, other girls will avoid her. Okay? We start to see that person only as a sexual being. When we talk about gay, lesbian, bisexual people, the first thing that comes into our mind is them having sex. But we never think of heterosexuals in that way. We think of heterosexuals as, oh, she prays in the church all the time. Oh, she watches Isidingo every day. Oh, she's so good at making cakes. But we don't talk about gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people in multiple ways. We only think of them as sexually deviant. Can you see the privileging and the disadvantaging of the two, of heterosexuality and homosexuality? When I then talk about heterosexuality being compulsory and privileged, that's what I mean. Now, in troubling anti-oppressive education, the points I want to make is, in schools, we need to understand what is said, what is known, what is visible, what is thinkable by the student, by the teacher, by the text, by the society. So when you study history, who are all the figures we assume the characters to be? We assume they are all, what sexuality are they? And heterosexual, right? So the visibilizing of heterosexuality is very clear in our schools. Now, I'm arguing, and through this book and drawing on this framework, I'm saying in the area of oppression and anti-oppression, what you need is not more knowledge. What you need is not more learning. What you need is unlearning. Okay? Now, this does not apply for mathematics. In mathematics, you need more learning. You need more theorems. You need lots of stuff to learn, lots of books to read. But in the area of oppression, like racism, you can't learn more about racism. If there's racism and you are racist, more knowledge is not going to help you. What you need is more unlearning. Get it? So you need to, if you're a racist, you need to unlearn how to be a racist. If you're a sexist, you need to unlearn how to be a sexist. If you're a heterosexist, you need to unlearn how to be a heterosexist. So I'm going to move on. So I'm in my book, the people in my book, and the stories that appear in my book are the stories of 33 life orientation teachers. Are you all going to teach life orientation in the class, right? No. Okay. How many of you are going to teach maths in the class? You're the smart people. Well, welcome. Pleased you're here. Okay. So the 33 life orientation teachers, 5 of those 33 life orientations were lesbian, gay, or bisexual. Notice I don't use T in this. And I'll tell you about that just now. And then I spoke to 19 lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth. I also observed 5 classes of life orientation teachers. I'm not going to worry about the next part because we're not going to discuss that. Sometimes I'm going to put some responses on the board. If you see WWL16, all it means it's a white woman lesbian who's 16 years old. If you see AMG18, it means it's an African man, gay, 18-year-old. Will you all understand that and remember that? Okay. Okay. Now, you'll notice that I don't have LGBTI. Now, I don't believe one should put T and I. When there are no T and I in the research, you don't say to people, yes, my research is inclusive. It's about lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex people. But your research doesn't talk about transgender and intersex people. In my research, nobody identified as transgender, nobody identified as intersexed, and so I used the words that the people identified with, lesbian, gay, and bisexual. Now, by excluding transgender and intersex people, it does not mean that there are no transgender people in schools. It does not mean that there are no intersex people in schools. There are. They're just not in my study. And while I do not include them in the study, I want to remain reflexive and let you always be alert of the exclusion or the invisibility of trans and intersex people in our society. Can you do that with me? All right? Great. So South Africa, and all of you from South Africa, I know some of the friendly faces in the audience are from Turkey, so welcome to South Africa. Okay. Anyone from outside of South Africa? I know we have somebody from Namibia in the class. Okay. Right? So South Africa, we are very proud as South Africans because South Africa was the first country in the world to come up with a constitution that said that nobody would be discriminated on race, gender, sex, class, religion. But it's the only constitution in the world that's mentioned the word sexuality. So it actually means constitutionally you cannot discriminate on somebody on the basis of their sexuality. So as a teacher, you actually cannot do that because if you do that, it will be illegal, it'll be unconstitutional, it'll be un-South African, and you just wouldn't be a nice person if you did that. Okay? So after that, 6 countries or 5 other countries followed, and now we have 6 countries in the world who reflect that in their constitution. Now, South Africa also has a range of other constitutions or legislation, work legislation, the adoption of children of same-sex couples. So there's the Marriage Act, the gender recognition legislation that recognizes trans people. Now, this is a very important slide, and Anthony, this was the slide I was talking to you about the legislative framework that is there and exists. So as a teacher, it becomes your responsibility to be a responsible teacher and to uphold this constitutional act. And we may hold different personal positions, but the constitutional imperative calls us to be socially just people. Now, the published research on gender and sexuality minorities in schools is a very interesting area. Now, firstly, you would see there's very little research done in schools on lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender youth. And the reason why there's so little is that to get ethical clearance to go and conduct research in schools is almost an impossibility. Okay? And there's so many gatekeepers as well that won't allow research in the area of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender in schools. Now, there are studies, and there's 26 to be exact, that exist. And any student who is doing their master's or their doctorate in gender and sexuality diversity, you may want to get hold of my most recent article that where this is in, and it's in the Journal of Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Youth. I'm letting you know because it comes out on the 26th of May. So if you send me an email, I will happily send it to you. And it condenses the research in schools. It condenses the research in schools. And every single article written about education and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender youth, I cover in that article. It is It is a full review, and it will appear on the 24th in the Journal of Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Youth, and I will happily send that to Anthony, who can disseminate it to those who use it. Now, one of the things about the research in lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender youth, you will see here how much of research is about teacher attitudes. And the research by teachers about Bana, De Palma, a lot of Francis and Ntsibi, Regan and Francis, and a lot of these people are asking teachers about their attitudes towards lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender youth. And what do you think the research shows? Do you think it's favorable or unfavorable? Horribly, horribly unfavorable. In fact, to such a point that it is horribly heterosexist and homophobic. Now, the next part is, some of you might fit into that category, pre-service teachers. And so people like Johnson, Richardson, Msebi, Rothman, and Simmons interviewed pre-service teachers like yourself. What do you think their attitudes were? Come on, I like that. Do that again. Say it loudly. What do you think?
I think they would be semi-susceptible to it.
Semi-susceptible, okay. Anyone else? Any other responses? How many of you think it will be favorable?
More favorable than the previous one.
Yes, okay. How many of you think it's unfavorable? Put up your hands. I can see many of you are unsure whether favorable or unfavorable, but it's okay. Yes, I do agree that in some ways there's a slight shift, but again, I'm using the word extremely unfavorable. That even the pre-service teachers' idea of teaching the area of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender youth becomes something that is unacceptable. Now, I'm very thankful at your university, you've got colleagues like, I have wonderful colleagues like your teachers who are actually exposing you to work around gender and sexuality diversity. But many others do not. Okay? Now, the next aspect is school managers. And school managers, the work of Divya Bana's work, again, the school managers were homophobic, homo-erasure, saying things like there are no gays and lesbians in our schools. And that is a stupid comment to make, because in every society, in every community, there are gays and lesbians. Like I told you, they're amongst us. Okay? Then parents, the work of parents against Babana, and parents' attitudes again on themes of morality and immorality. And then finally peers, and my own research, again the attitudes by young people towards gay lesbian people are not positive thoughts. On the whole, the research is 99%, 98 to 90% heterosexist and homophobic. At times I will use the word heterosexist. Heterosexism is a system that privileges and disadvantages. I prefer the word heterosexism to homophobia, because homophobia is actually quite a silly word. Like hydrophobia. Hydrophobia is somebody that's frightened of water. People who are homophobic aren't frightened of gay lesbian, they're just ignorant. Okay? But heterosexism is a system that privileges and disadvantages. All with me? Okay. So, when there are available studies, and they talk about lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender youth, some of those studies are misleading. And the studies are misleading because if you take some of the studies which include, at the bottom there, some of them include tertiary students, some of them include youth who are out of school, some of them include youth who are working. So they're not 100% of school attending youth. Now, the only studies, there are 4 studies that are conducted solely with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender youth. And the authors at the bottom are the people who have conducted that research. Okay? One of that research I'm sharing with you today is the one on my work. Now, I'm not going to share too much with you because I don't want to share too much with you because I think a lecture of this might just map out the terrain for you only. And I think that's useful, right? Now, researching gender and sexuality diversity in schooling in South Africa. And I'm talking to a lot of the people who are pre-service because I'm hoping you all come and do your honors here or your masters and your doctorate work. And the context is the disparity in schools. So all of this research was done in the Free State. And I'm mapping out a context here. In the schools in the Free State, there was a high level of racism. In fact, in the year in which this research was done, there was newspaper articles that spoke of African people as baboons. It spoke about colored people working at cliques only. It spoke about no Indians allowed in certain parts of the Free State. The swim cap test, you must have all learned about that, where African girls had to put a swimming cap on their head, and if the swimming cap didn't fit their heads, they had to cut their hair very short. If the swimming cap went full on to the head, then their hair was acceptable. But I want you to think a little bit about that, how oppressive that is. And I also appropriate a lot of race and gender because I want you, by appropriating the other oppressions, to understand, for instance, how heterosexism works and hurts us all, actually, like racism hurts us, like sexism hurts us. Now, I want you to think about that swim cap test a little bit more. Can you imagine somebody telling you to put a swim cap test? I'm probably going to fail that with my hair, so I won't be able to fit all my hair in. But it's a little bit more, because it's saying that African women can't be feminine. They can't have an identity. They have to have a hairstyle that's short, back and side. But that little rule tells you something else, which I only thought about recently. That by asking African women to have short hair and styled in the way that a school determines it, is saying that you only have one purpose, and that's physical labor and being a worker. Now notice what the same message is sent to Indian women or girls, or white girls. You can be feminine, have an identity, but the world is your possibilities. Okay? Now that's always good for the master's and doctoral students of how you should be interpreting your data as well. Okay? So heterosexism and heteronormativity. In the schools in the Free State, there was a school in the prospectus, it was called the Curo School in the Free State, which wrote in its prospectus that if gays and lesbians came to the school, they would convert them, that the school would convert them. Okay? Now, can you see how offensive that all sounds? Can you imagine saying to all the heterosexuals, if you came to this institution, you will all be converted too. You know, your liking of boys and girls isn't really that, but you can be converted. Okay? Now, the life orientation, also you could understand the status of life orientation. Life orientation is the subject. Teachers who came to teach life orientation many years ago were teachers from Afrikaans, were from physical education, where there was invested kind of heteromasculinity. There was teachers of biblical studies, teachers of guidance counseling, and when these teachers didn't have jobs, they were all put to teach which subject? Life orientation. Can you imagine the most important subject in our country, the protection of democracy, human rights, and we put the teachers that were made to feel so horribly useless by saying you don't have a job, you now can teach life orientation. But not only that, what it did was, it gave that subject the least amount of resources. Maths and science and English, all of these had beautiful resourcing. But, hello, welcome. And the resourcing it gave to life orientation teachers was zilch. So if you can think about schools, life orientation for the matrics would be timetabled in the afternoon. Maths and science would be in the morning, in the best times. Good budgets to those departments. And so you can see, but the biggest point of all, that life orientation also was not an examinable subject. So it removed the status of this altogether. I'm telling you all of that because these are the teachers I interviewed. So I want you to know who they were. They were across a range of race and gender, all in the Free State. Now, when I read the literature, and those of the master's and doctoral students who are working with the literature of lesbian, gay, bisexual, often the word is, oh, they are such a hidden population. And So I read that and I made note of that. And so when I spoke to gay and lesbian youth, I said, how do you think about the reference to yourself as being part of a hidden population? And so this one person said, would say to me, hidden. Why hidden, and hidden from whom? So notice how we've invisibilized gay and lesbian people ourselves by creating a hidden population. They're not a hidden population. They exist. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people exist in the society. What we've done is we've invisibilized. Okay? And that's such a cool ringtone, actually. Okay? Right. And then the next one is as a professor, and at the previous university, I served as the dean of the Faculty of Education. And as the dean and professor, what I did was I had to also submit my research for ethical clearance. And I tell you what, to do research on lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or anything that has to do with the word sex, the university will look at you, but that's not research. Why are you doing that research? So master's and doctoral students, good luck in that. But I had to go through the same processes. And when I went through the processes, my ethics was granted under the following conditions: that I use pseudonyms, I maintain anonymity, I informed consent, all of the ethical protocols I had to follow. But so when I spoke to the gay and lesbian youth, one of the questions that the gay and lesbian youth, I would say to them, so I thought I'd be kind, and I said, okay, I can't use your real name. And they would say to me, no, but use our real name. We are out. Everyone knows I'm gay. My auntie knows, my mother knows, just my teachers know. You can use my name. And I would say, but because of the ethical clearance, I cannot use your name. But I said, but can you choose a name for yourself? Now, here's an example of how the agency of gay, lesbian, bisexual, these are 16 to 17, 18-year-old young people, and how they screw up the research process, how they mess up and they talk back to as professors, our research process. And in fact, they're laughing at us in some ways. And so look at the names they chose. Monkey She-Boy. Okay? Another one chose Long Banana. How's the Le Coq? All right? And so what they were doing is they was hypersexualizing the names that they were choosing in a way as a kind of talking back, in a speaking back to me and my position as a researcher. But something else I want to share with you now, and I don't know if I have sound, but I'll stand very closely here to share this with you. One of the participants, I'm going to play a clip from this participant. So on the word of hidden, with the youth, in arranging the interviews, I would set up the time, and I would usually have to go and sometimes meet them at school. And after school, if somebody needed a lift after the school, they would say to me, can you give me a lift to can you give me a lift to a certain place? And I would say, yes, I could. And so this person, as I'm giving this person a lift, is texting crazily home to say to the person, I'm coming home. So I get there and he says, park your car here, park your car here. So I park the car, and this is in Heteronormativity, which is a largely predominantly colored township. So this 17-year-old gets out of the car, and he said, I've got to park the car out, and then I see he's going ahead to the house that where he's going to belong. But as I park the car, all the people are opening the curtains and they're looking at this white BMW that's parked outside. Thank you. Are looking at this white BMW that's parked outside the house. So I'm thinking, what's going on? So I'm getting yelled at from him, wait, stay in the car. So I'm staying in the car, and then the next thing, the doors open, and this participant runs out with many people from the house, an auntie, the neighbors, and a couple of the other people coming. So there's this idea of how being gay or lesbian is so closeted in many communities. For me, whilst that was the case in some spaces, in other spaces, it wasn't like that. And here is one example where it wasn't like that. And so I want you to listen to.
Auntie, okay, University. Hy het in die kar gekom om my te interview. Om my, en ek is net 'n noffie. Hy het al die pad gekom om my te interview.
Okay, so there is laughter there, right? Now, I want you to listen to the piece because the piece is played for a particular reason. This person is saying to this auntie, his auntie, that this person, a professor from the university, has come all the way to interview him. Okay? And the line is, en ek is net 'n moffie. Is not an offensive one to himself. It's that I'm simple. It's just me. But this person has come all the way and is interested in me and in my narrative and in my story. Okay? And so the narrative opens up a different meaning to being hidden, to being concealed, to being frightened. And of course, this is a conversation I have for master's and doctoral students, is the future research needs to talk about inside and outside of researchers. Who are we? Are we insiders? Are we gay, lesbian, bisexual, doing research with gay, lesbian, bisexual people? Are we straight researchers researching gay? How is the insider, outsider? And that's a topic that needs to be engaged with. And I think, Anthony, you've got some powerful students that engage with that as an area. The sampling and the recruiting of participants. Who are your participants? How do we include transgender? How do we recruit? How do we get around gatekeepers? Negotiating consents and access to gatekeepers, the diverse and alternate methodologies, ethical protocols, specifically issues around anonymity, informed consent, and participant risk. In fact, like I mapped out the literature review for you, the methodology section will need to pay attention to these key issues. Now, this is my last slide, and that's where I'm going to end the lecture. So the book, in overview, is the following. There are four analysis chapters to the book. And the first one is the shifting positions of inclusion. That the book shows that in the past, where teachers, young people, and all the literature I showed you, who made very religious arguments for not teaching about homosexuality, now make very religious arguments for the inclusion of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender issues. So let's look at that first line there. And so you've got a lot of these kind of comments about, oh, you're going to love the sinner, not the sin. So we have to teach about homosexuality. What do you think is so glaringly wrong with that sentence? What do you think is so glaringly wrong with that phrase? Love the sinner, not the sin. What's wrong with it?
Being gay is a sin.
Yes. That still being gay is a sin. I'll give you another example that a lot of the teachers also make is, I teach about this and I'm not going to judge because who am I to judge? And judging is the bigger sin. Again, homosexuality is a sin. Do you get it, everyone? Even though they're making the reason. So I'm calling facetiously this chapter shifting positions of inclusion, because the teachers are shifting and saying, yes, we have to teach, but citing religious arguments which are not necessarily very good arguments. Of course, the next one teaches every teacher, yes, I teach about gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender issues because they too have rights. Again, what is wrong with that comment? That's right. They too have rights. But there's something else. There's something deeper than that. There's something a little deeper. Okay? Yes?
So it sounds as though we're doing the inverse.
Yes. It's saying, I have to do this because I'm compelled to. They have rights. So I have to do this because they have rights. Not because my position is one of equivalence and social justice. Not because my position is that equality, social justice are the themes of the reasons why I need to do it. Thank you. The third comment, and this came out so often in the data, teachers would even go to the point of, there was this point of something happened. Now, I find this, my research always talks about this, is that every teacher, somebody was gay, lesbian, or bisexual, there's always the reference of something happened. So they became like that because something happened. Now, notice those of you who are heterosexual in the room, and I am very respectful because you too have rights, right? So in the conversation, it's the side, her father was an alcoholic and she's a lesbian, and something happened there, or her brother was watching pornography, everyone knew about it, and of course what happened? She became a lesbian. Or something, he was leaving school and out of school, and he was leaving school and he was depressed. Something happened. Now, of course, the heterosexuals that try to commit suicide every day, that watch pornography all the time, that whose mother and father drink and fight in the street, we don't make the connection with, they're heterosexual, but something happened. The mother gets drunk and she fights on the road. Can you see the privileging and the disadvantaging? Can you see it? So the next one is the curriculum, the policy. Now, all teachers in life orientation, did you know that nowhere in the curriculum statements does it tell you that the words gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender actually appear? Same-sex sexuality doesn't appear. You didn't know that, right? I bet you didn't read the curriculum statement. But our curriculum statements, the Namibian curriculum statement does mention that. It uses the word homosexuality in the Namibian curriculum statement. And in Namibia, you have the anti-sodomy laws. In this country, nowhere in the curriculum is it explicit, those words. And I've done the study, so I've gone through every curriculum document and statement. The textbooks include and talk about it, but talks about gender and sexuality in a very pathologized kind of way. Okay? So pedagogy, classroom, norms, routines, and practices all run in the way that everyone there is compulsory heterosexual. You're treated in that way, the metric dance, the way the invitations are gone, it's all around heteronormativity. Okay? And then if you want to bring a man partner, if you're a man, it almost seems that you deviantly got to contest or transgress the norm at the school. It's never pronounced or made explicit. And then, of course, what teachers say and do. The third point is, and this is talking to the master's and the doctoral students, all the research in the area right on this theme, troubling the agency victimhood trope. All the research in South Africa, and I'm talking about all the research with LGBT youth, talk about them either as victims or they experience curative rape, they experience homophobia, as though the only defining thing about being gay is homophobia. But there are many gay, lesbians, bisexual people who have full, fulfilling, positive, lovely lives every day. Okay? So those of you who are doing the research, please move away from the pathology of how bad gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people is. What is positive about their lives as well? How are the other parts of their lives that are interesting and exciting needs to be included in the research. And then, of course, the visibility and invisibility. This was, a lot of teachers, there are no gays here. Of course, the other one is somebody's only gay or lesbian because it's a fashion. She's only a lesbian because it's fashionable. And that came through a lot of the time in the data. Of course, in some parts, many teachers could not articulate the words gay, lesbian, same-sex sexuality, homosexuality, and often use the word it. In fact, in one narrative which I use in the book, in talking about gay and lesbian sexualities, the teacher refers to it 17 times in the reference. And then we counted the data of the teachers, of the 33 teachers, and the reference to homosexuality as it refers to 420 times where teachers refer to homosexuality as it. By referring to it, what happens is you make sexuality inanimate, you make sexuality invisible. The last one is the visibility, that homosexuals or gay, lesbian, bisexual people are only visible in schools when there's surplus visibility, when homophobia and bullying and violence comes to the fore, And then the second one, the second one is when violence comes to the fore. The first one is when gay men or lesbians are in the schools, and teachers will often say, but why does he have to be so loud? Or why does he have to be so gay all the time? Or why does he have to be so effeminate all the time? Or lesbians, why can't you just be like a girl? Why does she have to be so vulgar? And so the visibility comes in those two forms. But largely, we see the invisibility. Now, I know I've been sent a sign that I've got 7 minutes, but I'd like to stop there. And if anybody would like to know more, I travel around a lot. I'm doing a lecture at WITS soon on gender and sexuality diversity. I will let Anthony know, and if anybody would like to listen more, I will be here. So thank you for listening and being here.